Waters are fast-moving.
Unlike other big rallies,
A bit earlier at about 7 a.m., a group from the...
Welcome to #PHVote 2013 Rappler.
Today on Rappler.
Enrile with his eternal philandering and unexplained wealth desperately needs a shrink as a mental health measure. His mind is sit, 3 times sit.
The fiery word war between Senator Santiago and Enrile continues. Santiago calls Enrile a liar, a womanizer, and the drama king of corrupt politics. A U.S. lawmaker warns against human trafficking and opportunists in areas devastated by Typhoon Yolanda. And embassy officials tell Filipinos in Hong Kong to protect themselves against the bird flu.
Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. We have news just in. Just a short while ago, Rappler has confirmed that Al Arabiya reporter Jordanian Bakar Achani, a reporter who has interviewed Osama bin Laden and was kidnapped in the southern Philippines nearly a year and a half ago, has just been released. Sources say he is now in a Sulu hospital, and AFP has just reported that Mazen Hayek, the spokesman for MBC, the parent group of Al Arabiya, has said that he is free, receiving medical care in the Philippines. We'll bring you more as we get the news. Moving on to other news, Senator Miriam Santiago adds another chapter to her colorful rivalry with Senator Juan Ponce Enrile. She asks the Justice Department to probe Enrile's 7 crimes, calling the Senate Minority Leader a liar, a womanizer, and the drama king of corrupt politics. Ayi Makaraig reports.
To use the language of Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games Catching Fire, yan o.
This girl is on fire. Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago burns with rage in her counter-privileged speech against her arch-enemy Senate Minority Leader Juan Ponce Enrile. Santiago blasts Enrile for resorting to personal insults instead of addressing her allegation that he is the brains behind the pork barrel scam. But Santiago also fires her own ad hominem attacks.
He looks like a female llama surprised in her bath. He reminds me of nothing so much as a dead fish before it has time to stiffen. If he has the courage, he should switch places with me. He should be funny and I'll be the asshole.
Santiago calls on Justice Secretary Leila de Lima to investigate the supposed crimes of the man she calls the Prince of Darkness. She charges him with 7 deadly sins, including supposedly running a smuggling and gambling empire. She hits him for 2 turnarounds on his supposed ambush before the declaration of martial law.
My attacker is the icon of shameless lying. Enrile with his eternal philandering and unexplained wealth desperately needs a shrink as a mental health measure. His mind is sit.
If Enrile dug up her low bar exam grade, Santiago pries into a supposed affair with his resigned Chief of Staff, Gigi Reyes. She cites a 1998 news report quoting Enrile's wife.
Christina was reported as saying, quote, in the Chicago Tribune, quote, that she no longer could tolerate his chasing after other women, including domestic helpers, cooks, and assistants. Walang pinapatawad ito. Kaya ayaw kong tumabi sa kanya. Nag-birthday party para sa kiridan niya. And this libertine pontificates about morality?
Enrile says Santiago's speech only confirmed what he said about her mental health.
Finally, I'm sad that she attacked some innocent people who are not here, especially my Chief of Staff, which I believe is innocent of all the charges made against her. You know, Mr. President, even my maids, even my security, I treat them like my buddies. Siya mismo ang nagsabi na ako ay maasim. Kaya baka kung may napilantikan man sa aking asim, siguro naman dahil meron pa naman akong magandang tindig, di ba?
The spat isn't over with Santiago challenging Enrile to a televised debate. Who will stop the clash of the titans? Senate President Franklin Drilon refuses to comment on the worsening word war between Senators Santiago and Enrile. With the leadership failing to intervene, the big question is how this institution, battered by the pork barrel scam and now this bitter feud, can ever serve the interests of dismayed taxpayers. Ay Makaraig, Rappler.
Lawmakers and a U.S. aid agency warn against human trafficking in areas devastated by Super Typhoon Yolanda, known internationally as Haiyan. Speaking to the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee, Republican Congressman Chris Smith says thousands of women and children in the Philippines risk becoming victims of human traffickers. Smith led the 3-member delegation to disaster areas last week. He says that while authorities are helping survivors, more attention is needed to stop opportunists from taking advantage of the chaos after the typhoon. Smith adds, the most vulnerable, women, children, the elderly, and those with special needs always fare worse during disasters. The U.S. State Department's 2013 trafficking report says the Philippines is a source country for sex trafficking and forced labor. The U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, also says it's monitoring the situation in the Philippines. Nancy Lindbergh of USAID adds protective services need to be strengthened to, quote, protect the children during this time of heightened vulnerability. National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, or NGCP, says 72% of the power load in the Visayas is now restored. In a statement Tuesday, the NGCP says 5 out of 8 priority transmission grid backbones damaged by the typhoon are operational. The restoration of energy lines restores power back to more cities in the Visayas, including Maasin in southern Leyte, Rojas in Capiz, and Catbalogan in Samar. But the NGCP spokesperson says some municipalities may still get rotational brownouts because there's a lack of supply. NGCP earlier said it would take more than a month to restore power in all areas affected by the typhoon. Energy Secretary Jericho Petilla also promised to resign if his department fails to restore power in these areas by Christmas Eve. But on Monday, Petilla admitted some hard-hit areas in the Visayas might not have power by December 25. More sources of funds to complete the 38.8 billion pesos needed for the government's reconstruction program are now available after the House of Representatives and the Senate approved the 14.6 billion pesos supplemental budget for the executive's disaster fund. The amount will be sourced from the unused portion of lawmakers' pork barrel, which was earlier declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. On Tuesday, the Senate passed a joint resolution that extends the validity of the President's Calamity Fund and Quick Response Funds in the 2013 budget for calamity-related purposes. After a difficult 4th round in October, the Philippines and the United States resumed talks for an agreement that will allow more American troops in the Philippines and give them greater access to military bases. Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert Del Rosario says a 5th round of talks is ongoing in the United States. The negotiations resume after the U.S. military's response to the Philippines' call for help after the super typhoon ravaged the Visayas. Talks between the two parties stalled because of disagreements on, quote, critical provisions. The Philippine panel allows the U.S. to construct temporary facilities in the Philippines, but the U.S. wants to limit Filipino troops' access to these facilities. Philippine Defense Secretary Voltaire Gasmin said in November, "We want access to both. It should not be limited to them. We want equal opportunity and equal access." The negotiations between the two countries come in the middle of the Philippines' maritime dispute with China over territories in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea. Consulate General of the Philippines warns Filipinos living in Hong Kong about bird flu after Hong Kong confirms its first human case of the deadly virus. The consulate advises Filipinos to observe health precautions like washing hands and wearing surgical masks when going to cramped places with poor ventilation. On Monday, Hong Kong's Health Secretary Ko Wing-man confirms its first human case of the deadly H7N9 bird flu. And a 36-year-old Indonesian domestic helper with a history of traveling to the city of Shenzhen and coming into contact with live poultry. The patient was admitted to hospital on November 27th after developing a cough and shortness of breath. Hong Kong says it will quarantine at least 17 people after this case for medical surveillance. The World Health Organization says 137 human cases of H7N9 have been reported in mainland China since February, with 45 deaths. This comes 10 years after the severe acute respiratory syndrome, the SARS outbreak, swept through Hong Kong, killing 299 people and infecting around 1,800. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden arrives in Beijing Wednesday to raise concerns over a Chinese air zone creating tensions in the region. China provoked anger last month by declaring an Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, over the East China Sea islands disputed with Japan. Under China's rules, all aircraft passing into the zone had to obey Chinese orders or face unspecified, quote, defensive emergency measures. Washington, Tokyo, and Seoul all sent military or paramilitary planes into the zone in defiance of Beijing's rules. At a joint press conference with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Biden says he will raise Washington's concerns over the air zone when he meets with Chinese leadership. Biden says the U.S. is, quote, deeply concerned by the attempt to unilaterally change the status quo in the East China Sea. An editorial in the state-run China Daily says Biden's backing of Japan would undermine his credibility in China. It says he should not expect any substantial headway if he comes simply to repeat his government's previous erroneous and one-sided remarks. Thailand's anti-government protesters and security forces observe a temporary truce Wednesday. Thailand prepares to mark the birthday of its revered King Bhumibol Adulyadej on Thursday. King Bhumibol is treated as a near deity by many in Thailand. Violence on his birthday would be viewed as a serious sign of disrespect. The mood is calm in the capital, with protesters helping clean up the area around the Democracy Monument. This is where thousands camped during a month of rallies against Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. In a bid to calm violent clashes, the police on Tuesday pulled down barricades and allowed protesters to enter government headquarters. This came after days of violent clashes aimed at toppling the government and replacing it with a People's Council. But protest leaders say the fight against the government is far from over. Let's now look at Rappler's Wrap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 5, Asian nations get the top positions in a report on global education, with Asian students beating their Western counterparts in math, science, and reading. Shanghai again ranks first in math, science, and reading. Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea round out the top 5 in math skills. At number 6, French experts rule out a theory that Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat was poisoned. The French experts' findings differ significantly from those of Swiss scientists who said last month that Arafat may have been killed by polonium poisoning. Arafat died on November 11, 2004, with doctors unable to say exactly what killed him. At the time, an autopsy was not carried out. In August 2012, France opened a formal murder inquiry after an Al Jazeera documentary linked Arafat's death to polonium poisoning. And at number 8, a comet described as a massive snowball in space did not survive its brush with the sun last week. NASA says all that's left of Comet Ison is, quote, a cloud of debris without a nucleus. Dubbed the Christmas Comet, the icy giant skimmed past the sun at a distance of just 1.17 million kilometers on November 27. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's The Wrap. Every story on Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel and your vote comes down to the mood navigator in the middle of the front page. That crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories that have affected our readers and viewers the most emotionally. These 10 stories have gotten the most number of votes on their mood meters. If you take a look today, front and center and basically dictating the mood of the day, Senator Miriam Santiago's privileged speech, the live stream. You have 10% inspired, 16% happy, 5% angry, and a large 61% amused. That blue color bringing out the mood of the day. Let's see if there are others that are blue. You have slightly here, 4%, and 6% amused, as well as 7% amused on this. That blue bringing the mood of the day. Today, most people are amused. That is Rappler's Newscast for today, Wednesday, December 4th, 2013. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Maria Ressa. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.